Welcome to another episode of the Growth Focus podcast. My name is Gary Lafferty, your host, where we bring tech leaders from all across the globe to talk things tech and career and business and entrepreneurship. This episode, I am very pleased to have Scott Kube from Cygnus Systems, and we will be talking about business side of tech, MSPs, service providers, and a whole lot more. So without any further ado, Scott, can I just ask you to introduce yourself, give us a little snippet about your story, how you started, where you, in tech, and where you are today.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. I'm Scott Kube. I am the VP of Sales and Marketing at Cygnus Systems. I have been there for 13 years. We are a managed service provider focusing on small and mid-sized businesses in the professional services space, predominantly in Southeast Michigan. I've been in the sales and sales marketing space for over 35 years and been in tech for probably 25 years of that. I came to my company. I had known the owner, who is my boss now, who's the CEO and president, for probably about 15 years in different channel manager capacities. And he at one point had asked me if I knew anyone looking to start in a sales role and then grow to lead the team. And I said, yeah, me. And he said, I was hoping you'd say that. And so that's kind of how we started, and here we are.
Brilliant, brilliant. I always love old stories like that, because it's sometimes just the simplest of conversations sometimes leads to years and careers worth of fulfillment. So
Indeed.
Let's talk about Cygnus. I mean, when we were talking offline, I was fascinated how it actually started, because it's been around for a while now. It's a very well-established company. Perhaps you could share with us, from the humble beginnings, how did that started and what it is today.
Sure. So Alex Berklis is the owner of the company. He started the company over 3 decades ago, literally at that point in time, along with some other things, building computers back then and selling them in addition to any other thing IT, just doing whatever it took to kind of get it going. Then, obviously a small company like Dell came along, and so that model of product-centric shifted to service-centric. We've gone through different iterations of managed services, bronze, silver, gold, and all the different things that a lot of people have done. Certainly skinned our knee over the process, learned a great deal, and improved quite a bit. So we've grown from our humble beginnings there to now doing what we do in Detroit and really enjoying what we're doing. And I've gotten better in terms of both the processes operationally as well as selling, which I think has been critical in terms of our growth and our ability to sustain a high level of customer satisfaction.
So for those who don't know what Cygnus actually does today, could you explain to us what is it that you actually do?
Sure.
And who you actually serve and the biggest problems you tend to solve for your clients?
Okay. So what we do is at a very, very high level on an IT kind of side of things is we work with small and mid-sized companies, so typically about 10 to 200 people, and we help them plan, implement, and support their IT systems. For the larger organizations, there's usually an IT person or 2 or 3, and what we do is we augment their efforts because IT needs don't come in a steady, even keel. They usually kind of come in waves, and no one staffs to the peak, so you're subsequently going to staff to below that. So you're going to have times when there's some capacity constraints that the people are dealing with, be that time or knowledge, and then we come in to kind of augment those, whether it's just with the people and or with like systems like a managed firewall as an example if they don't have firewall expertise. For the smaller organizations, we tend to be their outsourced IT. So you can see in both scenarios we're a service-centric model. So that encompasses quite a bit of cybersecurity tools that are put in place, along with the ability to call us from a remote and on-site support if that's appropriate, as well as the backup and processes that we kind of put in place for them in case there's some incident or a need to restore a file, folder, whatever, and keep them up and running.
Gotcha. So it's interesting. I want to just go back a little bit there. You mentioned with the smaller companies outsourcing their IT, things like cybersecurity. When it comes to dealing with the smaller sized businesses like that, as opposed to the larger ones and the enterprise ones, what is the general misconception these businesses are having when it comes to outsourcing their IT? Is something they're rather scared of, they're losing control, not having enough control? What is their biggest misconceptions?
So I think that, everybody, if you've got a company, you've got somebody that you're calling for IT if you're more than a single person, right? So there's it tends to be, initially you may have someone that they're working with that they've worked with for some time. And what we tend to see if it's a smaller organization, and we've been there, is you just get capacity constraints. If there's only 1 or 2 people, they can only take on so many accounts. And then what can happen is maybe you don't return calls as quickly enough, or you begin to have to add as a business, and therefore you can get discrepancies between the knowledge of engineer 1 versus engineer 2 as an example. So as we kind of matured through what Paul Dipple, does some benchmarking in our industry, calls operational maturity. We've done some things in terms of standardizing our technology stack, which is instead of kind of the cowboy-esque or entrepreneurial thing of like, what do you need? Yeah, we can do that. And being okay at a lot of firewalls as an example, we kind of standardize and really work on like one. So by doing that, we're able to kind of have all of our engineers go to training and get certified on those products, which for the end users tends to mean lower downtime, and if there is an issue, faster ability to restore that and get it up and running sooner rather than later, because we can send any one of the engineers versus just the single individual who happens to be trained on that, right? And also, if we see something in one customer, because we've deployed it on our network and across, then we're able to then kind of really keep things up and running, higher uptimes, lower downtimes, that type of thing.
Gotcha. You
know, the cybersecurity, though, Gary, in terms of misconceptions, what I would suggest, is that I just think that a lot of executives, because they don't come from an IT background, they don't really know what to ask their IT person. So they can a little bit of technology, right? They'd be like, do we have a firewall or am I protected? And if that vendor says yes, then they don't know what to ask after that, unlike finances or some other areas that they may have expertise in. So what we tend to see is there's a lot of blind spots, I'll call them, when it comes to executives when we sit down and talk with them. And what our philosophy is to ensure that you understand where you are and then what it would take to reduce risk, because that's one of the key roles of any business owner and executive is you have to be able to manage business risk in addition to the other things that they manage. And you can't manage what you don't know. And so I think, unfortunately, in our industry, there are some folks out there that, for whatever reason, don't bring up things that are risky or expensive or whatever. And I think it's important rather to kind of let you know where you are and what it's going to take to fix that, despite the cost, and then let you decide what level of risk and cost that you're okay with.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good idea. I know when we were talking before off camera about educating the actual client, and this is a classic example of educating the client of what to buy, how to buy, and stuff like that, because if they don't know what they don't know, how can they possibly know what to ask for?
Exactly.
When it comes to
that's dead on. And I think it's one where we see it a lot because what's happening, especially in the cybersecurity space, is it's getting more and more press. So I think more and more executives and owners are becoming aware of it. But as the bad guys get more sophisticated, so do the folks in the white hats, if you will, for the cowboy analogy. And those manufacturers are continuing to invest and develop products that continue to get better and better and better. And so if you're relying on the tools that you used 5 years ago and just think, yeah, I'm fine, I haven't had an incident, you're operating in a little bit of a delusion. And it's important that you understand what those tools are, what they do, so that you can kind of determine if that makes sense for you.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it's moving so quickly that even, and I've interviewed a lot of people when it comes down to cybersecurity, and one of those misconceptions is that you have to try and understand everything all at the same time. And when you're trying to run a company or being a CIO or CTO in a company, you don't have that time to learn everything. And that's what the experts are there to do, to keep tabs of it. But because soon have you learned something, as you say, it's moved on so quickly. Yep. And even cybersecurity says, we're the best in the world. We're always trying to be one step. If we can just stay with them, rather than being 1 or 2 steps behind, right, we're doing really, really well. And I think the fact when we talk about they not knowing what to buy or how to buy, one of the insights that we've definitely had before was those people who are buying it or who are charged with investing in it and buying it, how many times they do that in their career? Once? Twice, right, maybe. So without that experience of knowing what to buy and what questions to ask, they tend to plumb do 1 or 2 things. And maybe you can agree with me or disagree with me here. They either put their head in the sand and go, I'll deal with that later when something happens, or I'll do the thing that I understand the best, which not necessarily means it's the best option for them.
Yeah.
It's just that they tend to understand a little bit more about that.
Well, I think, unfortunately, a lot of folks in the IT space begin to talk in what I'll call geek speak, which when you're then talking to a CEO, to your point, if I don't get it and I don't understand it, much like if you start talking Spanish to me and I don't know that, I'm going to be uncomfortable. So now I'm going to, to your point, want to move away. So it's important to find a partner who's going to be able to talk with you at your level, to be able to understand revenue and costs and profit and risk and all those types of things that are critical that the CEO addresses. And at the same time, be willing to be proactive enough to make sure that at that level that you're aware what the business risks are, like I had mentioned before. And I think it's important to kind of push some of those proactive conversations. I hear quite a few times when I'm talking to folks that they're frustrated because while their IT person is good at fixing issues, I'm really not hearing anything about artificial intelligence or the latest trends in cybersecurity, or is cloud computing right for me, or when should I go? So those kinds of things are important to have those conversations, and it's just we find it best to kind of do some kind of regular rhythm. And as much fun as IT is to talk about, quarterly is probably enough. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, depending upon what's needed. But I think that's kind of a good rhythm.
Yeah, I think you just nailed the nail on the head there about the geek speak. I love going backtracking a little bit because, especially in the industry, and those listening know that I tend to be very outspoken. If I have a point about something, I'll make it. And I think generally, having been in tech and been around tech people for so many years now, there is a tendency for tech people to get in the weeds too much. And they will say that because they believe the more I explain, the easier it is for them to buy. And it's actually the opposite.
That's
because
right.
the more you get into the weeds of it, the more you try and explain, people will start switching off. They don't really understand it. They'll try and kick the can down the road a little bit to maybe, the CEO doesn't understand it, I'll stick it to my CTO, the CIO. And then if they don't understand it, or if they should understand it. So, yeah, I love what you said earlier about actually just bring it back a little bit. Let's talk in terms of making money, saving money, not getting sued, and compliance, right? And utilizing those things, it makes it a lot easier for people to understand. So that's a really good point that we made there, Scott. So on that theme, let's talk about continuously with educating our clients, educating them on what their dangers are, how to buy it, and whatnot. What kind of methods have you used within Cygnus now to make sure that people are in the know? Like you said, maybe quarterly, maybe slightly more, slightly less. What kind of methods and methodologies are you using within your business structure to help your clients and prospects know what to do?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, it's kind of those regular rhythm meetings, and we've expanded in this 2024 quite a bit to where most of our customers, a few years ago we would do it mainly with just the managed service clients. We've expanded that to kind of touch everybody because we've seen the value in being able, to your point, educate people, help them understand where they're at and what's available out there. In addition to that, we've done some educational types of things in terms of events. Those could be in-person events. They could also be webinars. We've done a little bit of both. The webinars are nice because this kind of format is good because you can record it, we can post it, and it can be up there. So we've got quite a few webinars that we've done this year, and even back a little bit further as I've talked with people and put them up on the webinar as a resource that we then kind of push out to folks. But also I've done in-person events from cybersecurity to also vendor-sponsored types of thing when that's appropriate. So just to your point, trying to get out there, so giving people an opportunity to understand what's available and understand their options so they can make better decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's a really key point is feeding them the information, making them cleverer, making them understand more, and therefore you become the trusted advisor as opposed to just a supplier. Because when you're just a supplier, you're a commodity. You're just like, there are tons of suppliers out there, and if you just want to shove that down someone's throat by saying, here, we're the best, we have the best quality, we have the best prices, then you're almost in that sea of sameness. You're not differentiating yourself at all within that marketplace. Everyone just sounds the same, with the same products, showing the same stuff, and you might turn around and say, hey, well our service is unsurpassed. We have great, we have a trust pilot of 4.95. We're great. But what you don't realize is everyone else is saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So that differentiator is super important, and I think educating people through these events is vitally important. So for those who are listening who think, okay, yeah, I've never thought about doing a webinar live event. Let's talk about webinars to start off with. There are, especially in the tech industry, there's webinars which you and I are going to talk about in a minute, but there's also this misconception that a webinar is all about telling you how great my product is. Right? And how, again, this is my product, this is how it does, here's almost like a live demo and all the bits and the bells and the whistles. How are your webinars, especially as we were talking off camera before, how are you utilizing webinars differently to that than the norm?
So we tried it to be one where to your point that earlier, was educational. 5 years ago, we did one where we had the head of the Detroit's FBI cybercrime unit speak. just because we felt at that point in time that a lot of small businesses felt that, well, I'm just a small business, I'm not a target. They're going after the Chase Manhattans and General Motors of the world, when we knew that wasn't really the case. So that was a kind of a really good, well-attended webinar that we did, and we've done others in that space. But to your point, it's not really, especially if it's geared towards executives and not IT people, it's not about, to your point, the features and what it is. They don't care about the black box with the blinky lights on it as much as we think that's cool, and I can tell you, just delve into that rabbit hole if we wanted to. It's really about, look, how is it protecting my business? Why do I need it? What are the differentiators that I should be considering? Not all the depth of information about it, because I think there's a place for that, and that's really if you're going after IT people, perhaps they want to know a little bit more because their base of understanding is deeper. But really, for the most part, what we've tried to do is kind of have two types of webinars and or events, those that are geared toward IP people and those that are geared towards executives, and there's a clear distinction between those two.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think that is the key point there, to have two types of webinars and to become proficient. If you want to be using webinars and events to grow your business rather than show your business, there are two types of webinars there. One is like the demo-led IT people. These are the bells and the whistles. This is what it can do, as opposed to, as I mentioned earlier, does it make me money? Does it save me money? Does it keep me out of jail? Those are the type of things that the executives are wanting to learn and wanting to know about, and that's the differentiator. Let's talk about challenges, because obviously it's all well and good saying, we have the best product, we have the best services, this is how we're getting out there in the marketplace. But businesses, running a business, growing a business is hard. It's something that you've got to keep your finger on the pulse all the time. It's not a straight line. There's always challenges that we have to deal with. What are the biggest challenges you're seeing, Scott, in growing the business as a VP of sales today, increasing that revenue? What are the biggest challenges you're seeing?
Just getting in front of enough people that have some degree of interest and want to have a conversation. I think we're living in a time now where, as marketers, we've bombarded the heck out of end users, and so it's like the car alarm going off. No one even looks anymore. There's just so much email marketing that's out there. I think it's very difficult to differentiate yourself from everybody else, like you were talking about as well. So we try and leverage a few different techniques in terms of direct mail, still do email when we have a authorization to email people, phone calling, maybe even a little bit of what we would call canvassing or just dropping in on people. But really with the pursuit of just trying to determine, look, is there any interest here whatsoever? If you absolutely love your IT vendor, then that's terrific. When was the last time you had somebody else check it out? Because like I talked about before, every customer that I have was fine when I initially talked to them, basically. Until a lot of them, it's like, look, we did a discovery. It's like when I walk around and I go to the doctor, if I feel fine, they still do tests as you get older because there's underlying things that we can't see. And the same holds true within IT. Now, there's sometimes it manifests itself in terms of I'm not getting great service or the callbacks or lingering problems or those kinds of things. But really the deeper issues there tend to be some of the things we were talking about on the cybersecurity front. When if you're running a company, Gary, and you have no idea about this risk that's out there, then that's scary. That's go out of business potential. That just would completely blindside you. And that's the thing that we want to make sure of by going in and talking to people. Look, do a no-charge assessment. Let somebody take a look at it, and you're going to get one of three things. It's going to be great, and you walk away and you feel great about that. It's going to be not so great, and you can either take the stuff and give it back to your IT person and let him or her go fix it, or choose to work with somebody else like us. And either one, any one of those scenarios, you're better off than having done nothing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just want to just sort of pull on a little thread there, for people who are listening and stuff like that, because, you're absolutely right, Scott, exactly what you said, but I want to dial it back for some people who just miss what you said there or dissect it a little bit. You're absolutely, when you come out to marketing, not getting to speak to enough people, so the people that you do speak to, we've almost got a two-stage process. It's number one, getting to speak to enough people is a growing business. If it is a numbers game, no matter what anyone says when it comes to growing a business, you've got to speak to more people. But then we have the next challenge of I'm fine, because you did manage to speak to them. I'm fine, nothing's broken. CIO's dealing with it, CTO's dealing with it, the department's dealing with it. I haven't heard any alarm bells going. The fire alarm hasn't gone off, so I think we're fine. What advice would you be giving to people there who are coming across this objection every time and saying,
yeah, I'm fine. And most people go, oh, okay, if you're fine, okay, I'll just go on to the next one.
Yeah.
You know, what tenacity, what kind of tenacity is that going to be taking?
Well, I think that for that, to me, that's like not even an objection. That's just a put off. That's
Yeah.
like you're just, and which is fine. But I think it's okay. You got to push back against people there, because I think, like in the book, The Challenger Sale, I think executives appreciate to some degree. They get a lot of yes people and everybody telling them, blowing sunshine up how great things are. And I think it's okay to ask people, can I challenge your thinking? I understand that, and pushing back to understand exactly what does that mean. Like, fine, like you have an in-depth analysis. Let's take it to a financial scenario. So someone's audited your books and you're fine is a much different story than I really think my accountant's pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's the same, and it's whatever reason, finances, it would be unheard of not to have some audit of your books occasionally. But with an IT, it never does that, right? Like, when was the last time that occurred? Never. They don't get an outside opinion. So that's where I would push back, and I would say more often than not, you should know that they probably haven't had somebody else look at it. Maybe they have, and if they have, terrific. Then maybe they are indeed fine. But most likely not. So I think I try and take quite a bit of confidence when I go back against the I'm fine push-off, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before I go on to the next question, I just want to say for anyone who has not read the Challenger Sale book, great book. Yeah, do read it. In fact, you've just prompted me. I always said I'm going to go back and read it. I think I read it last time, it was 2 years ago or something. I think that's going to be my next book to read again, because I got so much out of it, like everything else. But back on track. The push-off is generally coming from one main thing. For people who, if you want to know why they keep pushing it, it's for ease, but more importantly, it's generally the lack of trust. And in business, we have to start building more trust. There's a huge lack of trust out there. Everyone's always looking for the catch. Everyone's looking at what's in it for me, what's in it for you, why you're actually doing this. And then that's almost become the new gatekeeper. The lack of trust is the new gatekeeper. Scott, in your experience, what insights can you give us, when it comes to building trust as a company, getting out there and trying to break down those doors, break down those new gatekeepers of lack of trust?
So, I think it's just trying to put yourself out there as an expert, if you will, and there's a number of different ways to do that. We've already talked a little bit about events and having those. I just think on a regular rhythm it's important to do, because you don't really know when people are going to have a need, or when they go from an area of satisfaction to dissatisfaction, or what that point becomes where they trust you. The other things that are, obviously ways to write books and articles, appear on podcasts or local telecasts, that type of stuff. So all of those things, I think, go towards that trust-based type of approach. Because I think you're right. If I'm going to push you off, it could be either I'm really, really busy in this area, I'm not even thinking about IT, I don't want to think about it, or it's like, hey, who the heck are you? I've never even heard of you. Why should I listen to what you have to say? And it's, so the I'm fine piece, where they're just trying to put it off, certainly doesn't answer the who are you and why should I listen to you type of piece. So it's just, I think, having quite a bit of events and then putting that out there to people, invitations, leveraging social media, and that's where I think that's kind of good, because you can broadcast events that you're having if you're specific enough in terms of this is who would benefit it from. Feel free to spread the word and allow people, where webinars are great, because whether you have 1 or 1,000 people, you can kind of support that, where obviously an in-person event, it's like if you have food, you've got to organize the space and all that stuff. It becomes a little bit more challenging, or a little bit more constrained, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think if, again, you've mentioned a nice little nugget there, which I want to go back to, because, again, it's easily, people are not, I'm listening to you and I'm nodding, yeah, that makes sense. But I want to, there's such a big impact there. Let's talk about webinars, for example, and then social media, like you said, Scott. Whether you've got one person there or 100 people there, the key thing is you're still getting your message out there, but more importantly, you're creating an asset. And that asset can be now used in social media. It can be used time and time again. It's a reusable thing, like old school brochures and stuff like that. It can be used to your advantage, to show your expertise, to show your authority, to show your credibility out in the marketplace where there is so much distrust. And likewise, when we all know about the 7 touches, it takes a minimum of 7 touches to even get some kind of response from someone. All these little things, there's a touch. And the more you utilize these little things, one webinar can come into 7 touches. It may seem like one thing, but it's 7. So again, for guys listening here, if you're not utilizing the 7-touch system, find assets to build that trust out there moving forward, because otherwise you just sound like everybody else, or worse still, you don't sound like everybody else, because no one's listening to anybody if they're in this distrustful world that there is. So really, really good points there, Scott. You got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's one of those things where if you've not gone out into the webinar space, just start doing it. Jim Collins talks about the 20-mile march, where you're just doing something and just doing it consistently. Because if the first time you're going to do anything in life, whether it's a webinar or whatever, I got news for you. It's going to be terrible. Yeah. And then you know what? The next one's going to be less terrible. But if you just keep doing it and just be committed to some rhythm, whether that's once a month, once a quarter, something that's doable for you. But I don't think, especially in today's day and age of marketing, you can have like an event, unless you're going to have like Satya Nadella from Microsoft come and speak at your event, or a world leader. Everybody's going to come. But if I just keep doing it, and to your point, now I'm accumulating assets that go up on the website. I can leverage on social media so the people that were live or they can consume it later. And I think that's another important aspect of things, is that in today's day and age, people are going to have a different levels of interest, right? So if I'm a little bit concerned about my cybersecurity, maybe I'm willing to watch about this much information on it. If I had a breach, maybe a lot more, right? So how much I'm willing to consume and dedicate time towards, I can't control that. But what I can do is have a number of different assets, to your point, and events that I've hosted so that people can pull that down, or if they see that and they go, not only is there a little bit to consume, but wow, these guys have had 3, 4, 10 different events, they may know what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah, super, super helpful from that. I'm glad you brought that up as well, Scott. And like you said, there's a tendency within tech to make sure you're perfect. I've got to be perfect at this. I've got to work out all the details. All the lights have got to be green before I actually pull the trigger on this. And in reality, you don't need that at all. As you said, Scott, your first one's going to feel like crap. You think, why am I ever doing this? And then the second one, you get a little bit better. And the second one, a third one, etc. I think there's a misconception there, especially anyone who's read Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours before you're an expert. It doesn't take 10,000 hours. You're not trying to be the expert. You're just trying to stay one step ahead of the people that you're trying to build trust with. If you think of it like a ladder, if you're on rung 2 or 3, you're ahead of people on 2 and 1. Right? Yep. You don't have to be number 9 and number 10 all the time. And I think, especially, as I said, in the tech industry, you just got to just go for it and actually do it. And you just get better at it.
Well, it's interesting, along those Malcolm Gladwell things, one of the things he talks about is literally the Beatles going out and doing those shows. So, I mean, they just started playing, man. I mean, they performed, but it's not like they just showed up at Madison Square Garden and had a massive event. It's like, look, we're going to put in our dues on a small venue, and that's the way the webinar is going to be. You're not, if you can get 100 people, great, but if you get a few, just keep doing it.
Yeah, look, and again, go on.
The hard part too, I think, is for a lot of the tech people they start out and they're an engineer by trade, and they come from that side. And so I get it. If you're configuring a firewall, you probably want to make sure it's accurate. Yes. Marketing's a little bit different. It's not rocket science, man. I just got to put forth some message as best I can, and if it's less than 100%, message maybe delivered. Maybe not as effectively, but still done.
Yeah, exactly. And every time you think of your favourite comedian and that joke that has you cracked up inside, that has been practiced time and time again, not at the big venues, but the little teeny venues, the downstairs venues where he's tried it, he's tested it, and got better and better and better. And it's usually a different iteration of it from its very first one.
Yeah,
it's never that one. So I think I think we've really sort of laboured on that point, but it's such an important point, to getting that thing out there. So, Scott, listen, I've always got I can't believe the time has gone so quickly. It really has just flown by. And thank you very much for sharing your insights on this. I've got a bit of a loaded question for you. I always like to ask my guests a loaded question.
Okay.
If you could, you've had a fantastic career, within, as you said, especially within the tech sales and whatnot. If you had to give yourself, your younger self, one piece of advice for someone who's either in sales, in enterprise, in the tech world, or has their own business, their own small enterprise, and therefore, because as we know, especially in tech, if you're probably sub 10, sub 15 million, it's still founder-led sales. It's still founder-led pushing that forward. Yep. What piece of advice would you be giving them today on maintaining their career, growing their career, or as a founder, getting their message out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was in a number of different fields within the technology space, and I think there's probably some advantages to getting a little bit of breadth there. But I would probably tell my younger self to try and think a little bit more of what space you want to be in, and then stay within that space. Because I think, and then when I say that, I mean in a few different facets. Are you going to sell to enterprise, mid-market, or small business? And then within that, am I doing software, am I doing services, or something else? And by kind of getting a little bit narrow and going really deep, I then begin to broaden connections within that space. So it's not only like just company A, if you will, and if things don't work out with company A, but going to company B, but that's still operating within that space. And I think that's the advice that I would give to my younger self. Not that it was fine, and I am where I am in part due to some of the mishaps and falling off the bike as we all do. But that's the piece that I think I would have been able to get ahead with maybe a little bit less skin knees.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. As I said, if you find your own find that swim lane. And it's like, rather than trying to be a jack of all to everybody, that never works. The old adage of, the riches are in the niches, as it were. Take that piece of advice and say, right, focus. I love that. Are you doing small, medium in that enterprise? What are you doing? Software, consulting, or services? What are you doing? Pick one, run with it. And then I love what you just said there, fail and fail fast. Fall off that bike. It's okay to fall off the bike. We all fall off the bike. Every child has fallen off the bike learning. My wife still falls off bikes. I bought her a tricycle because she keeps falling off her bike. As adults, it doesn't change. We do fail, but it's how we get back up. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, Scott, thank you very much for your time. It's been, an absolute pleasure, chatting to you today and, sharing your insights and sharing your expertise. Now, if people want to get hold of you, they want to know more about what you do, what your company does, what's the best way of getting hold of you, Scott?
So they can email me if they want, Scott K at CygnusSystems.com. You can also phone it 734-626-2438. Either one of those, and then our website is just CygnusSystems.com. So feel free any one of those ways you can reach out and find me.
Brilliant. Well, I'll make sure I'll put those links in the show notes below for everybody so they can just click on it and get straight through to you. But as I said, thank you very much, Scott, for your time and your insights today. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. And thank you guys for joining us on this episode with Scott. And as I said, as always, if you've got just one thing, one nugget, one idea, one inspirational that you've got from Scott today, make sure that you like it or you comment on it or you subscribe, but more importantly, you share. Let's get Scott's messages out there, Scott's insights out there to help everybody within our industry grow. So until next time, thank you very much for joining us. And to the next episode, Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. No doubt we'll chat offline a little bit more. Thank you very much. So until next time, guys, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next episode.